I'm Tobias Lokasson. I'm the communications directors for Loki's Wyrdlings, and I have Ky Greene with me here. She is the CEO of Loki's Wyrdlings. We will be doing an interview to talk about Ky, your experience with the Troth and how it's affected you, as well as some incidents that you've experienced with other members in the Troth as well. So to get started, uh, Ky, do you mind introducing yourself to us?
So, as Toby has said already, I am Ky Greene. I am the CEO and founder of Loki's Weirdlings, which is a global trans-led organization. I use all pronouns, so any pronouns are fine, right? So that just to get that out there. And the experience that I had with the Troth was actually quite traumatic. I was actually part of the High Rede of the Troth in 2021, and I left in 2022. And I was essentially subjected to what can really only be called workplace mobbing, which is a type of organizational bullying.
Thank you. And we will discuss talk about that a little bit later in the interview as well. So at the beginning, you said you joined the Troth in I believe you said around 2017. Do you want to explain your connection with the Troth as well?
Yeah, so in 2017, I that was actually the year after Loki's Weirdlings was founded, and I had to kind of decided to try to expand past like just the single community that I was part of. And the only organization at the time that was heathen and was also allowing discussion of Loki, even though they weren't allowing hailing Loki, was the Troth. So I joined them in 2017. In 2018, the following year, however, there was an article that came out in the Wild Hunt that a member of the Troth, at the time at least, he's no longer a member now, by the name of Carl Siegfried, wrote entitled essentially Loki in the White House. I don't know if that's the exact title. I may have misquoted that. But he essentially compared Loki and Trump to one another. And there were quite a few of us, including Daggle Flopson, who got together and wrote a letter to the Wild Hunt, which was very public. And we were like, we want this article taken down. The Wild Hunt refused to take down that article. And instead, I ended up contacting the Wild Hunt and proposing essentially what would become a counter article. And that, when I wrote that article, the title is The Lokian Community, What We Really Look Like. And in that article, I actually said very specifically that the only Lokian community that I was speaking for was that of Loki's Weirdlings, which at the time was actually pretty small in comparison to what it is today, right? There was 450 members in 2018. There's
Wow.
over 2,000 today, right? Like, it's probably kind of hard to get an exact number since we have members that are some in Facebook, some on Discord, some overlap. So it's hard to know exactly how many, especially because we don't charge for membership, right? So we don't have an easy way to keep track of our members the way other organizations do.
All right. So, while in the Troth, did you involve yourself in any other programs with them or any other aspects of the Troth other than being a general member?
Yeah, so when it comes to the Troth itself, part of the reason that I joined outside of it being at the time the only organization to allow hailing Loki was the lore program, right? So the Troth to this day still has a lore program. I don't think the structure's changed all that much, although I couldn't speak on that for certain since I did leave the organization in 2022. But originally, whenever I joined, you had to wait a year after you join to even enroll in the core curriculum of the lore program. Instead, you could take what is called the Heathens Essentials course, which
Mhm.
is an introductory course. It's like I think it's 12 units, maybe one or two less or more. But that was essentially the only thing you had access to for a full year. So I was really just kind of biding my time. And it was after that article came out in the Wild Hunt and I had written my counter article, right? A little bit after that, the Troth announced it revoked the Loki ban, And while I can't exactly take credit, right? Like that article did help kind of catalyze, I think, them moving in that direction. They were already kind of moving in that direction to begin with, so I do have to give them credit there. Um, but it was after all of that that somebody nominated me to the High Rede. So I accepted that nomination and I was elected in 2021. So I did serve on the board of the Troth.
Could you describe your experience with the Troth as a member of leadership?
Yeah, so this is really where everything kind of started for me with the bullying that I experienced. Although for a while I thought it was just like lack of organization, which I said in a few comments to other board members. But I was never given any training of any sort whenever I joined the board. And the Troth is an organization that has existed for almost 40 years at this point. So they should have onboarding programs. They should have onboarding packets, right? They should have all of that training available. I received none of that. And yet I watched the next time people were added to the board, I watched them get onboarding packets that I had never received. So a year later, I watched other people get packets I never got. So that was part of what I saw with leadership. The other thing was that there was no organizational handbook. I do not know if that's changed now, but it made it very difficult, to know what I needed to do as a board member when I had nothing to consult. Because usually when I'm in a leadership position, I read the manual. There's no manual.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we're still working on ours, and Wyrdlings, right? We're still working on ours, but at least we have it, right? Like, and we're a much younger organization,
and that's a very relatable situation. As with what you mentioned with Wyrdlings, we're still working on ours. Is we're very young, so not having one here made a lot of sense. So for you, it was kind of just disorienting. It sounded like.
Oh yeah, very much so.
So the Troth involves themselves in the community via events and gatherings. Did you ever attend any of these gatherings or events as a member of the Troth?
I only ever attended Trothmoot in 2022 because it is written into the bylaws that all board members have to attend Trothmoot every year. And so the board did pay for my expenses for travel because I would not have been able to pay on my own because I don't make a lot of money. I make like 22,000 a year, right? Not very much. And I live in Arizona, and that particular Trothmoot was held in Tennessee.
I almost went to that one.
Yeah. So
I didn't end up going.
Yeah, so that's the only one that was physical that I ever attended. I did attend a couple of online, like the virtual Trothmoot in 2021. I did attend that. I didn't really do anything but watch what was happening though, right? Like it was kind of a passive observer. And I went to a few of the monthly moots that Crow implemented whenever she became steer.
And at this Trothmoot, you said 2022, I believe. What was your experience at that Trothmoot of the culture, just the vibe of everything? Like, how did you feel as a member being there?
It was really interesting because it was really mixed for me, the experience that I had at Trothmoot 2022, because a lot of the members were actually pretty, chill. They were like, I got along with them. Like, I have made some pretty good friends that I'm still friends with now. And then I had Crow basically harassing me, although I didn't recognize it as harassment at the time. I do now. So there were quite a few things that happened at Trothmoot 2022 that cannot be really easily explained away as anything other than harassment. Especially the volunteer service award ceremony. I think that was probably the worst. Whatever Crow had decided to implement a volunteer service award ceremony, which is, it's a great initiative. Like, so that's perfectly fine. And it was the first one that the Troth had ever done. And I had been a volunteer for a year at that point, right? So Crow came in as the steer in my second year as a board member. Previously, she was the communications director of the Troth. And whenever it got to the point where volunteers who had been serving for a year were getting their awards, my name was not called. Out of everyone there, I was the only person who was not given anything until I directly confronted Crow about this privately afterwards. So I don't have, like proof of this, and that it's kind of sucks to not have proof of it. But instead of apologizing or, like telling me that, like she should have let me know that there was a list that I needed to sign up for, she basically was like, well, why didn't you put your name on the list? There was no apology or anything. Like, there was no understanding of the impact emotionally of what something like that would have on someone else, right? So that was really the most damaging, I want to say. That, along with her constantly telling me that I was the reason that the Troth was losing members.
I see. Were there any other issues with leadership in Troth that you've had that led to any official discussions with board members or anything that you had to take in official reports?
Yeah, so this is part of the reason that I left the Troth. There were a group of people in the Troth who were harassing me and had been harassing me for a while. I have documented evidence that there were people legitimately trying to force me out of the organization, which is actually where workplace mobbing or bullying really comes in. And with this, there were also rumors being spread, which is one of the tactics that gets used within the workplace mobbing type of harassment. And Crow actually informed me of some of the rumors, and it was clear that she had been influenced by those rumors. And I wrote an arbitration request, right? Like, so I sent in a formal arbitration request, and that arbitration request went only to the steer and the associate steer. For those who are not familiar with those terms, the steer is essentially the CEO, and the associate steer is the vice president, right? So those are the positions there. And not long after I had sent in that request, the associate steer was assigned to handle it, because the Troth at the time didn't have an arbiter. But I don't know. Sorry, I'm getting my things a little out of order. But essentially, because they didn't have an arbiter, the associate steer was assigned to handle it. However, before he got a chance to handle it, I became aware that the person that was responsible for harassing me had released on TikTok a video that contained a line from my arbitration request that had only been sent to upper management. So someone leaked the information, and that person took it public without, and it just got to the point that, like, anytime I brought up the fact that I was being harassed, Crow would turn it aside, and she would accuse me of trying to undermine her. Like, there was also the fact that whenever I told her I'd sent in the arbitration request and it wasn't about her, she was like, well, I'm upset that you put this information in here. So it was just really a mess, because all around it was like she was basically being complicit in the harassment that I was undergoing, because she wasn't trying to put a stop to it.
Right. And we will have screenshots and evidence available in this video, as you've already seen already, as for anything that we do need to support what is being said. So you've mentioned workplace mobbing a few times now and harassment. Do you mind explaining a little bit more about what workplace mobbing is for those that aren't aware of it?
Yeah. So workplace mobbing is essentially group bullying, and it's actually experienced pretty frequently by a lot of people. Like, I've known quite a few people who have been subjected to group bullying, right? Like, a lot of Lokians, unfortunately, do tend to end up in those situations. It is very prominent in the nursing field, so the medical field as a whole, the social work field, and also in nonprofit sector. And the reason that it is so common in those particular sectors is because these are positions that are very difficult for people to lose.
Mm.
So whenever it's hard to basically fire or get rid of someone, workplace mobbing does tend to happen more often. However, the culture of an organization has to sustain, it has to essentially have certain atmosphere in order for the mobbing to occur at all.
So, do you feel, with that knowledge, that the Troth could have done anything about the workplace mobbing had they had a chance to deal with it?
Honestly, I don't think that there is anything the Troth can do to combat workplace mobbing unless they replace pretty much their entire board and completely change the way their culture is run, because there are three major elements of workplace mobbing, right, that show up in like the culture of an organization. The first is a lack of ethical decisions, which, you know, we've kind of already seen with Crow's response to my arbitration request, right? Like that was very unethical. Whoever leaked the information was also unethical. Um,
There's also been recent events as well.
yeah, of course, you know, that's already, I will say this, that the Troth did actually handle that, so I'll give them credit. They did finally, they did get that handled. I have personally unfriended many people because they have shown support for Paxson despite evidence, and I can't, having been the victim of childhood abuse myself, there's no way for me to, you know, like be in support of people like that.
Understandable.
So the second major element of an organization's culture that contributes to workplace mobbing is essentially an atmosphere of competition and self-driving, like self-interest essentially driving people. And I saw a lot of that in the Troth, right? Like some of the first things I ever heard were about how these other heathen organizations are trying to poach people from the Troth. There was a point that Crow actually told me that the reason for the membership like not being allowed to volunteer for a year was in order to prevent poaching. There's very much an element of competition, which whenever there's that kind of element of competitiveness among people in the same organization, kind of precludes the ability to collaborate in any meaningful way. And so there's always going to be this sense of people trying to like undermine or like steal power. And I was never participating in that because I don't understand the appeal, because like we're here to do a job. Like, can we just do the job, please? Like, get on with it. And the third is a lack of creativity or like inhibition in general. So like turning down member ideas or not letting people, you know, actually go forth and do things that they want to do in order to make the organization better. Like, you know, the Troth had been asking for Discord for a long time. I don't know if they have one, because every time it came up, the board would just, in general, and especially Crow, would be like, write a proposal. Like, that was always the response, write a proposal. We don't have the staff. Like, and that's not a good way to get members involved. And it didn't help that every time, well, I can't say every time, but at least the one of the times that I attended the monthly moot with the Troth, Crow became very emotional about how much work she had to do as the steer, that I actually asked her later if I could give her feedback, and she told me that I could. And then she basically dismissed it after I told her, hey, you're not going to get volunteers if you show them that you're basically breaking under the weight of the work that you're doing. And she assumed that I meant that I was telling her that she needed to be dishonest, which is not the case, right? Like, you don't have to be dishonest. Like, I don't know how to parse that. Maybe you have a better way to phrase it.
Dishonest in what way? Like,
she basically said that she wanted the membership to see her as like an approachable person, and that like see the emotional like impact that the position had on her and that kind of thing, that she wanted to be emotionally vulnerable with the membership, which in a different position might be okay, but not as the CEO of an organization.
Hmm. Um, so you're trying to, you want to tell her she needs to be dishonest or not be
I
dishonest?
wasn't telling. No, she told me that I was essentially say. Well, she didn't say this exactly, but she implied that I was telling her that she should be dishonest about how much work she was
Oh,
doing,
okay.
whenever all I
It's
was
not
doing was telling her to, take a step back when she was trying to recruit
right.
volunteers.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying now because like it's not about being dishonest to people. It's kind of like with I don't want to say compare it like in terms of children, but oftentimes with children you don't always give them all the responsibilities of I have to pay electricity and the bills and everything because they just don't understand it. So it's more withholding unnecessary information. People don't need to know how much work it is because you are literally the head of this organization. There is a underlying assumption that you are going to hold a lot of the workload. And so people already can see what you're doing because of the ripple effects within the community. To give an example with Loki's Weirdlings, you are the CEO, but you don't run the Discord because I run the Discord. And in the Discord, I don't run it all. I now have a team that I'm building who will continue to run it. And so people know you're doing work because you gave me the Discord to work on. And so your impact and work as a CEO is shown by how it affects the community all the way down, how it trickles down. And so if the community is thriving at a membership level at the most common equal member, if there's a thriving community there and it can continue up, that means that the CEO is doing work. And if it's just chaos and completely unconnected and just no one feels they're on the same page, and then that shows that there's not a lot of work being done. So a CEO's work doesn't have to be told, it needs to be felt and seen.
Yeah, I would agree
That's
with
at
that.
least how I would always put it.
Yeah, no, I,
Um,
I definitely agree with that because um, I think there's still people in Loki's Weirdlings that don't know I'm the founder, because it doesn't
no.
matter to me if people know who I am, because so what? I'm sitting here doing work. I don't need them to see it. I just need the work to get done. Right?
Exactly.
Like, so me coming and like speaking publicly, this is not something I do. This is, I think, the first time I've ever done it, and all of the time I've been part of Weirdlings, because I do not like being on camera, and that is not a secret, right? Like, everybody knows that.
Yep. So moving on a little bit though, because we were talking about workplace mobbing and
Yeah.
how you experienced that. So what are some of the tactics, other than the ones that you've mentioned, that you've experienced in the Troth that were considered workplace mobbing tactics? Um, you mentioned the competition, the culture of a competitive mindset. You've mentioned the oppression of creativity and a few others, but are there any specific situations that you'd like to mention that are workplace mobbing tactics?
Yeah. So, spreading rumors is a really, really big tactic with workplace mobbing. And that is probably the thing that has haunted me throughout all of my years as Loki in the position that I'm in Loki's Weirdlings. Like, you yourself are aware of rumors that were spread about me. Like, if you want to speak on
Yep.
that, that actually might be beneficial.
Now the rumors that I had heard weren't connected to Crow or the Troth, and I would like to make that very clear. There was a member of Loki's Weirdlings who I had met during a Loki Fest. I want to say it was the 2019 one. It was the one in August. And we connected and we got along really well. I was a member of Loki's Weirdlings, but I wasn't super active. This person recruited me to be admin in their group, in their Loki group, and I accepted because I wanted to be part of the Loki community. I just finished being actively in the community in Amino. So when I joined this admin team, I heard a lot of negative talk about Loki's Weirdlings. This admin member, all leading up to having me be on their team, was also always telling me about how Ky was not untrustworthy. It was that you had minions. That's what it was. They were really focused on your minions. And that there were these minions of Ky out there. And I'd never seen these minions, but I was just like, okay. And that Kai liked to there were some other things that they claimed. It was so wild and just out there. I just kind of like was real, it felt off. And it actually made me really not want to like connect with you, but I also was like, I want to connect with this person because I feel like they're very knowledgeable and there's somebody I could like really learn from, like not in a weird way, but just kind of like there's someone good to have in your life. And so finally I realized this person just focused on everything negative in their life. Like every day they were attacked. Every day they had this happen. And it got to the point where I was like, I'm losing a lot of trust in what you're saying. What you say doesn't have as much weight anymore to me. So I decided to disregard all the rumors that they had told me, all the gossip they had told me. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to get to know Kai as Kai. And I have found Kai to be an incredibly trustworthy and caring person. Like in our personal life, we've become close friends. And there are many times that Kai is there for me. I know Kai's not the friend who will hug you and say, cry on my shoulder. Do not, I know that. But
Nope.
there are times where, I need someone to talk to. And I know I can go to Kai for good advice and to really like break things down and get to the heart of it and be like, maybe the problem is this. And I'm like, this is why I came to you. But gosh darn it, did you have to cut it so quick? But I found that a lot of the rumors were unfounded and that it's best to get to know somebody, especially someone who isn't showing that these rumors are true. Like I've never heard you bad talk anybody in all of the years I've known you. Like unless they're an actual problematic like author, you never have talked of someone's reputation. You've only given facts of like, here are the facts. This person is a bad person, morally, objectively. But if you don't know somebody, you go, I've not had good experiences, but perhaps you can get along with them. You always leave it neutral, at least in my experience with you.
Yeah, I do my best to do that because I can't judge another person's experience, right? Like that's up for everyone else to do for themselves. Hadn't heard the minions thing before, so that's news to
Yeah, I
me.
forgot
Do
about
you
that
feel do
one.
you feel like a minion, Toby? Because I feel like you tell me
No.
more. You tell me more about what I can't do with the Discord than I tell you what to do with the Discord. Let's be real about this.
If I'm a minion, I failed at that job because I talk back way too much to be a minion. I mean, ask me to do something, I likely will come back at you with a but why?
I've noticed,
I want to know why. I am
and
not minion material.
yeah, and actually, I tend to try to cultivate people who will come back against me, right? Because I don't want people who just agree with me. That doesn't get anything done.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, no, those rumors are absolutely not connected with the Troth, as far as I'm aware. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
However, they're very similar to the kinds of rumors that were spread about me in the Troth, including things which I have screenshot evidence for, where I was accused of claiming that I was a Loka Pope and that I was self ordained. First of all, I'm legally ordained. That's not a self proclamation, that is a legal statement. Like, just make that clear. And I think maybe it would be best coming from you. Do I consider myself a pope of any sort?
No. No, actually, I think more often you hand rituals off to me to do because you're like, I don't want to, I don't want to be public. Like, yeah, you've never come off as a pope. You've always been like, hey, if somebody wants to worship that way, it's not for me, but if it's for them, like, you don't put any dogma. You've never come across as being like, I mean, yes, there is the spiritual leader aspect of being in a community, but you've never been like, I am the spiritual leader. Like, you don't wear the pope hat of Lokians.
Does
Um,
the pope have a hat?
yes,
Anyway,
yes, he
now
does.
I'm going down a tangent in my head.
He's
Anyway,
got a very, very distinctive hat,
oh, the tall
and
hat,
trust me.
right? Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I wouldn't wear a hat like that
Um,
anyway. It looks ridiculous.
it does look ridiculous, and it's hard to walk through doorways.
I
But
didn't think about that part.
hmm uh, but side tangent. We had a character at Haunted Soiree that had that kind of a hat, and he had to like at every doorway because it was like 3 feet tall.
So that's so inefficient. See, listen, I wouldn't be a pope just because of the lack of efficiency that hat would cause.
Right? You'd be like, I'm not wearing this. But yeah, no, on a serious note though, no, you've never been someone to enforce dogma, enforce rules, or say that your way is the only way. You've always been very supportive and open to other groups outside communities. You've been open to receiving new information as well. If someone's like, hey, I have found updates on this information, you're like, all right, I'll check it out, and you're willing to change. So I've never really gotten that feeling. You're just another person in the community. You just have a little more work on your plate. That's how I've seen it.
And just as a full disclosure here, both of us have ADHD. So if there's tangents, it's gonna happen. Just so you know.
I'm
Um,
also not on my ADHD meds right now, so this is fully willpower.
I am, but they're not always effective enough.
We both are extreme on the ADHD.
Yeah, we are.
How do we get stuff done?
Well, my anxiety helps me. Literally, it's
I think I do a lot of stuff just out of spite.
so your anger helps you. Got it. Got it.
So I'm gonna be like, I'm just gonna prove that I can do this. Let's go. All right. Um, I'm trying to get us back on track.
Oh, rumors. We were talking about rumors.
Yes, rumors.
Right. So, spreading rumors is one of the major tactics that's used in workplace mobbing. And there was the Loki Pope thing, which I don't even know where they got that idea. There were also the rumors that Crow informed me about were being spread about me. Apparently, that I practice hoodoo and that I do baneful magic, connected in a very weird way because those two things are not the same, right? Hoodoo is not
Right.
baneful magic; they're not equated, and to even attempt to equate them reeks a little of racism because like the only reason that this rumor even got started was that at Troth 2022 I was attending a bloat, I don't remember to which goddess. I think it was the Idun ritual. Don't remember for sure. But I mentioned kind of offhand that my business partner is a two-headed doctor, so she's a hoodoo she's essentially an expert hoodoo practitioner. That's what that term means. And by the end of the day, apparently people thought I did hoodoo. And I'm like, no, that's my business partner. I don't know how you got those conflated. And the fact that then I was like, there was apparently also something about me doing baneful magic. I'm just like, no, I don't do that. Like the tradition that I practice doesn't allow for it. And I said that, told Crow that. And then there were rumors about me attempting to undermine Crow. I don't know if those started elsewhere because Crow herself actually accused me of trying to undermine her. And she even did this when I told her I was being harassed, and she turned the attention back to herself and how I was undermining her, rather than focus on the fact that I was literally telling her I am being harassed.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, sorry, there was something that you mentioned that I wanted to touch on with the hoodoo. I had actually heard that rumor before that you practiced hoodoo. And I don't remember which one of the Loki Fest it was, but you had cleared up. It was in one of the classes you did how you were like, I know I don't teach hoodoo. My business partner, or I don't practice hoodoo. My business partner practices hoodoo. So I remember being surprised actually when I heard that because I was just like, wait, what? I thought you did practice hoodoo. So that was something that had kind of been conflated, I think, even prior to that, because it wasn't, I don't remember what year it was exactly, but it was before 2023 for sure. So that might have been just a rumor that it happened.
I mean, Troth Note happened in 2022.
Right. So I don't know if it was 2021 because I remember 2019 is when we met. And then I don't remember. I'm really bad at time with ADHD. So, and then the other side of that was the baneful magic, though. This might just end up being a side tangent, but even if you did practice baneful magic, why would that be such an issue when baneful magic is part of a core of Norse magic? If you look at Norse magic, there's there's a lot of baneful magic options, especially in Sather. So, like, that's another question I kind of have is, I guess from an outside perspective, I don't understand where I'm just not getting it, I guess, as a practitioner of Norse magic, but I'm just like, no, we get our hands in the dirt and we
Yeah,
will do some baneful stuff.
so I think it kind of goes back to the truth, like that competitiveness, right? So like
Hmm.
that seeking for power. So that rumor kind of also implied, it wasn't outright stated, but it was very implicit. It's like people do baneful magic to take people out of power and like to gain positions, right? So there's like that level
Oh,
of competitiveness. It doesn't exist in Weirdlings, so of course you don't see it here, right? Like because
right,
we don't do that. We don't compete with each other. Um,
right.
but I that was why that was a problematic rumor because it's just like it fed into this fear of me attempting to undermine Crow, which
Okay.
I'd never wanted to do. If I wanted to run for steer, I would have run for steer. I did. I never wanted that position to begin with.
Yeah.
Who
It'd be a
wants to
little too much
be
work anyways.
who wants to be a CEO of two companies at the same time who's not making
Not
tons of
I.
money? Like,
Right. Not I, said the fly. So that's a lot how it would have affected you in your relationship with the Troth, but do you feel that this workplace mobbing, all this bullying, everything that you experienced with the Troth and with Crow, do you feel it has bled into other aspects of your life, like your personal life?
oh, it absolutely bled into my personal life. I mean, I found my antidepressant dose essentially tripled before they started working again because I became legitimately suicidal. Like I had those conversations with you,
Hmm.
because it got to the point that I felt invisible, right? Like I felt unnecessary, and it didn't matter because and I didn't know where it was coming from. That was what made it so bad. It's like I didn't know why I was feeling as awful as I was, and
Hmm.
it took, as you're aware, it took like a year and a half for me to really learn what had happened and to finally put a name to what had happened and start to kind of slowly recover from it because it was quite a lot of trauma.
Yeah, as a personal note between the two of us, yes, I definitely saw a huge difference. We really actually didn't talk a whole lot during that time either. Our own personal relationship changed, and it didn't feel like you were the same person during that time. But other than just your personal life, did it bleed into aspects of your professional life as well?
So it definitely bled into weirdlings, right?
Hmm.
Um, it didn't. Luckily, it didn't bleed into my mundane professional life because nobody uh was savvy enough to like write letters to my advisors and people to try to like harass me at my place of work. Um, although I have heard of stories of that happening to other people in the Troth with documented evidence and it not being supported. Yeah.
Oh
But
wow.
so this is not the first time workplace mobbing has occurred, and if it occurs in an environment once, it typically reoccurs, which is what makes it so hard to root out. Um, but when it comes to weirdlings, like because I felt so like because the experience with the truth had made me felt so invisible, right? To the point I was literally suicidal, right? Like I felt that anything um I touched was basically like I don't really know how to put it exactly, but it made it hard for me to let go of control, even of things that I had already said I was going to let control of. And I think you probably have the best example of this because of what happened with Loki Fest last year, right? Like I mean, it's
Yes.
impacted me even up until that point. So
Yeah, so for Loki Fest 2023, I was I was for during 2023, I took on the role of event coordinator for Loki Fest. 2022 was a year that unfortunately, and this is not any reflection of Kai's ability to organize an event because Kai has organized events for Loki Fest in prior years that went smoothly and were much better. But in 2022, there was so much going on, so much on your plate, Kai, that I remember you coming to not only me, but you've also mentioned in passing in like the committee group that you were just like, I'm so sorry. I'm able to get to X, Y, and Z. I've been dealing with all of this school stuff and this stuff and that stuff. Never once did you mention the truth being part of it, but you just were just like, I completely blanked. I'm so sorry. And so you came to me privately and we were talking and you said, I feel like I'm gonna have to find somebody else to do Loki Fest. I can't give it the attention it deserves. And having been on the committee for 2 years in a row, I was like, I kind of see I don't want to say the failings. I really hate that word, but I kind of see like the weak points. Whereas like you have this great structure in place, you have this great like base recipe structure, but it needs a little more reinforcement, a little more, something needs to go to the next level. And so I did volunteer to take that over, and you said, great, out of my hands. I don't have to worry about it. And I went, bet, I'm so excited. Let's go. And I had all these ideas and I was so ready to go. And as I began to implement different ideas and I began to try and delegate tasks away from you, I was met with almost every single situation was, that's not how we do it. That's not how it was done in the past. uh I've already done it this way and that way. And I'm like, I understand that, but you're not the coordinator anymore. I am. And I'm trying to work off of what you have established to make it run smoother. So it's not just one or two people running this whole event. We have like 15 people. And so that was a situation where I eventually began to feel like I was worthless. I began to feel like you didn't actually trust me. I felt like you didn't actually believe that I could do this and that you really just wanted to control it still. And so I think I directly said I felt like I was being undermined every single time. I was like, I feel like every time I try to do something, you just come in and shoot it down, and it's making my team not trust me as well. I got to the point where I almost just dropped it in your lap and went, fine, if you're gonna be this way, then I'm out. Like I almost didn't even talk to you about it. But I am glad we talked because, and this is one of the things I do value about our friendship, is I come at you and be like, listen here, I'm not okay. And you don't take it. And I mean, there's some personal issues, but like you come back and you're like, okay, this is how I feel. And we're able to work through it. And so through working through Loki Fest, I personally feel that's where the gears started to turn a little bit, where you started realizing something wasn't right, and that you were like, I am getting in the way. And there were some other aspects in outside of just Loki Fest within Loki's Weirdlings where we had also butted heads a lot. And it just, once you started backing off and once you started accepting that like this isn't something you need to control, it started to thrive, and you're still part of the team and you're still valued, and everyone loves everything you've done. I do want to say that, like, we do appreciate you. But it was so frustrating for me to try and do this for you and with you with this constant like ah. but but yeah, but now that we've worked through it, we have a great relationship, and I'm really excited for Loki Fest in the future. And you've been really supportive and helpful and a great advisor now as I'm taking over the reins. So it's like a 180, really. It's like working with a whole different person.
And I
So
mean, for me, like, and it helped me that you were willing to be like, listen. And it's something that I've said like from day one, if you have a problem, tell me you have a problem. And because I'm not going to take what is coming from, hey, you're making my job harder, here's why, and it having actual, like, weight behind it because there's evidence for it, and be
yeah,
like, no, you're wrong. Like, that's not conducive to a good relationship of any sort, personal or
right.
professional, right? And I did eventually be like, all right, fine, I'm gonna step back all the way, and I did. And that's the important thing to learn in leadership. Is something that I learned whenever I did my minor in leadership studies, is that it's really important that a leader know when to step forward and when to step back. And because of everything that was happening to me and all the emotional aftermath of what I was going through, because of what had happened to me when I was in the Troth, I was stepping forward when I should have been stepping back. And we have discussed this in depth between
Yeah.
us and as well among the board itself, right?
Hmm.
Because I do tend to take responsibility for my actions. I know it's a crazy
Yeah.
concept these days. Um,
You also, I did want to, sorry, not to interrupt, but I did also want to say with the stepping forward versus stepping back. Once you learn to step back, like I said, it did help. But on the other hand, um, apparently nature said, what if we threw in some chaos And I had gone through I went through personal loss. There were tornadoes happening on the day of Loki Fest. I had had COVID. And so about the month leading up to Loki Fest, I could not handle it. And I actually did have to say, Ky, I need you to step in for me, please. Like, I'm tapping you in. And you stepped forward. You picked everything up, everything that we had worked on as a group. And it was wonderful. You did a great job, and you were able to step forward when I was like, "Help, I'm drowning." And so I think that also is a key thing to also mention here is that not only did we repair our relationship as coworkers and friends, but you also came in and supported me when I absolutely needed you. And it honestly was almost seamless the way it happened. So that also I feel like shows to your growth and your change and your journey of healing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Um, so is there anything else that you'd like to talk about and how it affected Weirdlings?
Yeah, so I think the other big area that was really impacted outside of Loki Fest, because I think that one was pretty bad, was the way I handled the website team. Um, so we have a team that does essentially curates the content for the private Weirdlings area of the website that we have for our organization. And every time the lead curator would come to me and ask for something, it would be like, I'll get to that later. Right. So it was just me constantly kind of dismissing the concerns of the website team because everything felt like I was basically having an ocean dropped on top of me, even if it was just something small. And I didn't have the words to explain that. And because of that, because I couldn't really explain what I was going through, um, and it absolutely does not excuse it, but I pushed the website team kind of out of sight, out of mind, sort of. And I'm really sorry for having done that to them because it made them feel unappreciated, right, and unheard. And that's not something I ever wanted anyone at Weirdlings to feel because I've always had a very strong belief that all voices should be heard. And I mean, you can probably speak more to that because I would prefer other people speak about how they perceive me realistically rather than through rumors, right? So people who know me are the ones that should be the ones speaking about me, not the people that don't.
Yes, and during that time, there were a lot of emotions flying from everyone. We could honestly probably do a whole episode or a whole interview of just everyone's personal issues during that time because our lives outside of Weirdlings, we had two members who had had deaths in their family. You were dealing with trauma and PTSD and all of this like coming to realization of what's happened to you in the Troth. And I believe there were other members dealing with other personal things that it got to a point where everything boiled over. And I remember I think I want to say around early 2024, I just kind of went, all right, I'm hitting the emergency stop button. And went to every single person and just I talked to everyone and I feel like that was something that needing to be heard was one of the number one complaints slash needs. And you're right, it was a situation where people weren't being heard. And now that I look back at it, I can see it coming from a place of so desperately wanting to be needed and so desperately wanting to be purposeful that when we would say, hey, we don't like that idea, or hey, can we do it differently? I don't want to speak for you, but it definitely looked like you felt like your idea was being taken away from you or that your credit was being taken away from you when it's like, no, you created the catalyst for this. And without you, we wouldn't be having this discussion. And so in that in itself, you're an integral part of it. And everybody really complimented on appreciating everything you've started and done and that they see you're a hard worker and that they see that you have this passion, but that passion grew into a wildfire. And so I have lost track of what I was going to say because I have ADHD. Um, So, the long and short of it, though, is that I ended up compiling a communications report. I had to be, I was like, listen, I can't be nice. And I had to tell you directly to your face, like, hey, these are the bad habits and you need to stop. But at the same time, I wanted to turn to this board and be like, hey, our CEO is also going through some incredibly difficult trauma that is directly connected to their job when we need to be understanding of them as a human being. But you also need to have your voices heard. So it was a delicate balancing act that I actually honestly feel like we're coming out of this pretty well now. That, and again, I think a key turning point is your willingness to listen and take criticism and be able to shape it and change it and adapt. Because without that, I was genuinely worried that Loki's Wyrdlings was going to fall apart. Like there were a few people who were like, if things don't change, I'm quitting. And there were some people who had already made up their minds to leave the team, and they were like, I I appreciate all the work that Ky has done, everyone's done, but like I can't handle it. I'm leaving, which was fine, but I was genuinely scared I was going to see the domino effect of everything falling apart. I hate to like directly quote the lore, but it felt very much like we were staring down the barrel of our own Ragnarok, and that you were trying to avoid it happening. But in your
Oh my
process of
gosh.
trying to
I think
avoid
you just
it,
compared me to Odin.
yeah, I wasn't the only one who brought this up. This got
Oh
brought up
god. So anyway,
independently by a lot of people, that it really felt like in your fear of Loki's Wyrdlings falling apart, in your fear of being useless and or being unseen, it actually was driving a stake between everybody. So it was a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of situation. So I definitely had a lot of fear. There was a lot of I was very scared. I was very, very scared. And I was like, if Ky cannot change, if Ky cannot see the effects of what's happening right now, we're not going to survive. And to know now that these problems trace back to your situation with the Troth, it adds another layer to this that I am still processing. But makes me feel better in a way, but also not great, because in one way I'm glad that it's not you as a person, but on the other hand it saddens me that an organization like the Troth, who I've always known to be this inclusive, like, top organization, like that's the one you go to, they're the good ones, that the good ones caused this to happen in a way that it rippled all the way over to this people who are not even connected. I have no connections to the Troth. I literally don't know anybody on the Troth, like other than you as a previous member. Like I can't think of any connections I have that are there. So the fact that it even came all the way to the point where I was about to leave a community I love, like that shows the stretch of workplace mobbing. And that shows just how much it can affect the people who are tertiary to this, like secondary and tertiary. Like it's not just a one place, one person situation.
no, it's
It's a
not.
continued cycle. And as Lokians, what do we do best? We break
Break them.
cycles.
And well,
Like the Kool-Aid man.
I don't know. I don't know. Don't
Breaking
drink the
through
Kool-Aid.
walls. No,
Anyway,
not that Kool-Aid. Breaking through
you
walls. That was
you
Flavor
shouldn't make
Aid. It's
Kool-Aid
different.
jokes.
That was Flavor Aid.
Mm, gotcha. Okay, because that makes so much difference. Anyway,
Okay. Anyways.
um,
So
but yeah, workplace
go
mobbing has
ahead.
the tendency to follow people, and as you've noted, um,
Hmm.
and it's incredibly hard to remove from an organization once it's been like allowed to exist at all. Uh,
It's like a rot almost. Like you got to get it before it takes over.
yeah, and I mean, you have to have systems and processes in place to prevent it from happening in order for people to feel safe. We got lucky that it only affected the leadership team and that it didn't spill out into the overall organization, right? It didn't impact our membership.
This
And
is true.
that's
I didn't think about that.
and it's only because we kind of caught it, right? Like caught it in time, because the person that that mentioned who left because they couldn't handle like what was going on was actually the reason I even figured out what workplace mobbing was to begin with, because they in our leadership chat confronted me and was like, "Hey, you're talking to me in a way that I find very condescending and you need to fix this." So I started doing research into how to not be condescending in communication, because I didn't think I was being condescending, and I don't think most people thought I was being condescending. At the time, I
I could
guess it
see
just
it.
is. It was kind of a mixed bag, I think.
Yeah, it was.
But whenever I was doing research on that, that's when I stumbled across an article on workplace mobbing, and all of a sudden, all the lights in my head went off and was like, "This is what I went through with the Troth." And once I had a name for it, once I was able to find books and resources and read through them to figure out how to handle it, I started being able to pull myself out of that like really toxic mental place. And it wasn't just toxic for like people around me, it was also like that was the kind of mindset I was in that was leading me to be suicidal, right? Like workplace
Hmm.
mobbing is so traumatic that there's actually a term, right, bully side, that is given for people who commit suicide because of it. So it is actually, I wouldn't say it's a leading cause, but it is a very strong cause of suicide. So when people intentionally try to force someone out of an organization and there's documented proof, if the organization doesn't remove the people responsible for both creating those rumors or like creating that like intention, and also the people at the top who perpetuate it, there's really not anything you can do, because the organization has to take responsibility for something that happens at an organization level.
Hmm. So with that, there are also, like you said, with workplace mobbing, we caught it early, and thankfully so, because I would not have could not imagine what Loki's Weirdlings would have ended up. But with going back to the different tactics of workplace mobbing, one of them that you mentioned is competition. And competition can come in many ways. It can be oftentimes people competing for employee of the month. They can be competing for positions in the organization. Did you at any point during this past year and a half, feel that your position was being vied for, that there was some sort of claim for power?
Not that I can really think of, honestly, because I don't really worry about things like that, right? Like I was more concerned about whether or not I was going to make it through the next day, because I was in such a depressed state that it was hard to just live my life, right? I was more worried that I was going to end up quitting Weirdlings than I was like. So I mean, I believe that's also the same time whenever I was like, do we have secession plans in place, right? Like that came up during that time period, partially because of everything that was going through. I was like, can somebody replace me? Because I need them to, maybe. So like, right. So that if I
Yeah.
did worry about it, it was like, how do I hand this off rather than who's coming after me? Because I didn't think anybody was coming after me, because I know how much work I do, and like I
Yeah,
know
you do a
none of
lot of
y'all want
work.
that work. Like so
If I had to, I would, but I'm not volunteering for it.
right, and that's how I felt when I was in the Troth, and that's how I felt whenever I was being accused of like trying to undermine Crow by Crow herself, because I was just like, no, I am not volunteering. Like, no, like that's like I don't know why you think I want this, because I don't. I never said I did.
Yes, please give me more for the overwhelm.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So, and I can definitely agree that, like, even in private conversations with other board members, there's never been a vie for power. There's been a really consistent theme of concern for your well-being. And the only thing that I ever saw was more of a call for you to just take a vacation. Not for you to step down, not for you to like quit, just like, Kai, maybe you should just take a break and just kind of take a step back for a little bit and just like, take a little bit off your plate. But never once did everyone was like, I don't want to do that job. That's a lot of work. So I can say with confidence that there is no one vying for your position. If we get voluntold, that's one thing, but we're not about to try and steal that from you.
Yeah, I think I tend to volunteer people sometimes. Just depends on what it is. Just because I mean, yeah, you get some of
Good
it because most of
volunteer
that's with the
too.
with the Discord. To be fair, you volunteered for the Discord originally, and then
I
I was
did.
like, all right. And then I tried to change something one time, and you were like, "Grr," and I was like, "Okay, it's yours,
Stop,
got it."
baby.
Um, but like, if someone's doing something and then someone else like something else needs to be done, and that same person who's already doing something volunteers, I'm gonna be like, how about this other person that's not currently doing something do that instead, so that the work is more like spread. Which like if the person who volunteers first can handle both things, go for it. But like also
Right.
everybody's on the board, so everybody should be contributing, and everybody like through all of this has been really supportive. So I do want to
Yeah.
say like I appreciate
And
the support that I've been receiving from the board.
yeah, so I guess we could say thank you, Troth. You brought us together.
After almost tearing us apart,
Yeah, but we came
we
out of
weathered
this
the
on the other
storm.
side.
We
We
weathered the
weathered the storm.
storm.
Okay. So, we have talked about how workplace mobbing has rippled from your experience with the Troth to your ability to lead, and how that has rippled into the board of Loki's Weirdlings as a community. Have you seen your experience of the Troth stretch anywhere else in other aspects other than just directly community to community that's in the rest of the greater community, I guess I could say?
Yes, I have, which is unfortunate because the Troth had an opportunity to correct this and did not. So last year, during the Parliament of World Religions, we had a representative there representing, of course, Loki's Weirdlings, who was approached by Lauren Crow, the CEO of the Troth, who introduced herself as the CEO of the Troth and immediately started essentially disparaging me as well as Loki's Weirdlings, right, within a very public area. Where a lot of other pagan leaders overheard her speaking and like saying these things, and none of these things were true, right? And that became clear as our representative for that event told us about what had happened. And we then had a letter, right? Like a formal letter that we sent to the Troth asking for an official organizational level apology because the CEO of the Troth had at an international event come up to the representative of another organization and just went off about the organization's like reputation and leader without any concern about the fact that she is the CEO of an organization or the fact that she was in an international space, right? So it became very clear that there was a malicious intent behind that because she started off with spreading rumors, right? And there was also there was an element of competition because our representative told us, right, that Crow kept telling her all about how the Troth had the biggest and best Loki bloats, right? So again, that element of competition comes back up. Um, we've never tried to compete with the Troth, like bloats or rituals. Like we don't need to because we have our own. Like we're the only community that does the Loki Fest every year. We're also the only community that does the Loki and Godspouse ceremony now, right? So at least, but if other
Yes.
people want to do it, we've never been like, no, that's ours. You can't
Go
do it.
for
No,
it.
go for it. Like if if you want to do it, go for it. That's your responsibility. That's not ours. We do what we do for our community. Like, and that's the thing is that my focus has always been on our community, right? So I don't
Hmm.
worry about people trying to compete from the outside because I don't care. If you want to compete, go for it. I'm not competing with you, so I don't know like what you're trying to do if you're competing against me because I'm not focused on you. I'm focused on the
Right.
community we're building.
During Parliament, our representative did mention that Crow led with being Loki friendly in the Troth and all their Loki events and how they have lifted their ban on Loki. But once our representative made it clear their connection to Loki's Weirdlings, that's when Crow began to disparage it as well as your reputation as its CEO. Other than this instance in Parliament, have there been any other times, whether at Parliament or not, that Crow has spoken down on Loki's Weirdlings specifically, rather than Loki themselves?
Yes, so that happened during Troth 2022. Like I said, a lot of this with Crow at least started during that event, and unfortunately, because it was verbal, it's harder to have proof of verbal like incidents. But we were discussing something about leadership. I don't remember exactly what, And I was telling her, that I had leadership experience based on things like with Weirdlings, and also like I'd served I'd served during my both my bachelor's program and my master's program in various executive level positions in various clubs. So I was pretty familiar with executive level leadership already, on top of the leadership minor and the associate's degree in business administration that I had, which has helped me with Loki's Weirdlings, right? Because it's like I had that knowledge that's helped me get things off the ground. And when I mentioned this, Crow's response to me was, Loki's Weirdlings is just a Facebook group, and would not acknowledge that it was a legitimate community, right? So it was just very much a like dismissal. And I have noticed since that Crow has a tendency, and the not just Crow, but the Troth as a whole has a tendency to disparage other heathen organizations just because they happen to not be the Troth. And that's really unfortunate, and it's very unprofessional and unethical. And I don't understand why they do that, because we don't go around, telling other organizations that they're not legitimate.
I was gonna make a comment on something else, is that you said that the Troth has been found to dismiss other organizations that they don't see as legitimate. Um, just realize that it also seems like if they don't operate in the same way, that if they don't operate in the same structure, in the same manner as the Troth, that somehow they're not
Valid.
legitimate. I don't
Yeah.
know. Valid. Yeah, I don't know a good word to put it. But yet I've also noticed that the Troth has Troth um affiliated like hearths and groups. And I was actually part of one of those for a while, and so it just kind of to me seems counterproductive. Yeah, we support these small groups, right? These small hearths, these small kindreds, which are could be seen as an organization of sort, but because we're an online group and we're not like a physical group in person that operates out of Facebook or operates out of a Discord or whatever it might be, that that's somehow different. So I do find that interesting as my own personal experience with the Troth, and with you're mentioning just a Facebook group, is that they were more willing to be affiliated with my previous hearth, which was, I think we got up to 7 people, versus saying us at now nearly 2,000 people. I remember when we were like
Over.
400. Yeah.
You're still processing that.
Listen, Discord has been getting like 1 to 5 new people a day, and it's stressful. The only time we got this much membership was during Loki Fest, so and it was only for like a week. This has been a lot more than Loki Fest's membership spike. But yeah, I find it interesting that like this is a group that we have not only provided a Facebook group for, but now we have an online temple where people have found it to be a place of sanctuary. That there's these places where we have got nearly 400 in the Discord. We have over 2,000 in the Facebook. That we are, and if you just want to go off of numbers alone, which is a big thing for the Troth, why are we not legitimate when this little like 5 to 7 like person or group that I used to be part of was? They're no longer affiliated with the Troth, but like I guess for my own mind, maybe it's the tism, but like
Well, I think it's important to say here that the Troth had actually discontinued the Kindred affiliation program
okay.
before I was even part of the board. I don't know exactly what year that was discontinued. So they, as far as I'm aware, have not reinstated that. So they no longer like endorse certain like kindreds. However, I'm sure that the kindred that you were previously in at one point were Troth affiliated. And as
They
you are
were.
probably
Yeah.
yourself aware, workplace mobbing, that culture of the Troth carried over into their Troth affiliated kindreds because of your own experience. And you don't have to share that, but
No, but I'm never really quite framed it in a workplace mobbing kind of way. I just took it as this isn't the place to be. Bye. But yeah, we
it
could.
was not that simple. We had much more in depth
Oh, I
conversations
know.
over it.
Oh, I
So
know.
We
Yeah,
both have a
we can talk
tendency to
about that
minimize.
later.
We both have a tendency to minimize trauma, as most trauma victims do. So I do want to make that clear that, because I'm sure there will be people who watch this and are like, oh, like they're not really all that emotional, and it's just like it's
I'm
called
also a
compart.
Sagittarius rising.
And I'm a Sagittarius sun, but it's also called compartmentalizing, and it's something that trauma victims do as a matter of being able to cope.
That's fair. Yeah, and coping with humor is one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite methods. So, now that we've ADHD'd the heck out of this, so back to the Parliament. So with the incident with Parliament, you mentioned that we did attempt to privately and professionally handle this situation on an organizational level. We did not want it to be something. It's a small thing. Like we don't need to go public about it. Like we're not going to make a big deal or a mountain out of a molehill. Um, and in that letter, we said, "Hey, could you just apologize to us directly?" They mentioned that they were going to release a statement. Do you want to talk about that statement and how we reacted to it and how it affected everything in the situation?
So we actually asked them for a public apology. So I do want to make that clear. We'd ask them for either
Oh,
a public
my bad.
apology or an official statement again for the stance of Weirdlings, like on their stance on Weirdlings, which they decided as a board not to give, which was, I still believe, unprofessional. Was not a personal issue to begin with, but they essentially said that like they couldn't give a direct statement to Loki's Weirdlings because it was an interpersonal conflict, and no, it was not. It was an international event where the CEO of an organization spread malicious rumors about the CEO of another organization in earshot of CEOs of other organizations that were also there representing their organizations, right? Like that, there's nothing personal about that. That's very professional. Like that's a very professional environment, and it's very clear lack of professionalism. And as a business leader, you should apologize whenever you mess up to that degree because that's just not okay. Um, so that was already upsetting that they weren't like willing to see what was clearly a professional issue as a professional issue. And then the statement that they released on April 8th, uh, we didn't even learn about until until May 3rd, I think. I think that's the date.
Yes, it was
And
May
they
3rd.
had told us in an email that they were going to let us know through email when they had released their statement. We never received an email telling us they had released their statement, and we found out almost a month after that they had released their statement. And if you read the statement, it goes against their bylaws. Like they literally
Hmm.
released a position statement in contradiction to their own bylaws. So I don't know how to view that other than lack of professionalism. Like I don't know, how do you view it?
Honestly, the moment I read the statement and I had read their bylaws of how to handle situations like that, I blue screened really. Like I just couldn't comprehend like that you were willing to just so blatantly go against what you've told the public how you're going to handle it. It's almost double standard. I think would be a good word for it. I'm not sure entirely right at the moment. I was shocked really that they were just willing to sweep their accountability under the rug. Like it's fine. And it just was very unprofessional to do that. Like why and immature as well. Just not even just unprofessional. It's also felt very immature. Like why can't you just handle this as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
like a professional adult?
Right. Like whenever your bylaws say that your board members are more accountable, like have to be held to account, and then you release a statement that says actually the personal opinions of any member of the Troth, regardless of their position, has no bearing on the Troth, even though your bylaws um
Right.
contradict that, because I can
Words are hard.
yes, but because their bylaws contradict that, like it's just what are you doing? Like, did you read your own laws, like your own bylaws? Because your position statement suggests that you didn't.
Right. And I do feel that there is a key component to this as well. An interpersonal an issue would have been Kai and Crow getting into an argument in private somewhere that's completely unrelated to the truth. it would be Crow bringing this up at, a McDonald's running into a representative or something. That would be personal. That's not a space where it's like professional, where Crow led with saying, I am the CEO of the Troth. So anything that she is going to say following that will 100% reflect upon her position. Two, it, she didn't even take any opportunity to know who our representative even was. Like, was our representative best friends with Ky or had never met Ky? Like, she was ready to say that to just about anybody at a place where, again, has been mentioned several times, other members of other organizations could hear her. So at that point, there is no way it is personal anymore because, again, Crow did not know our representative. They did not know our representative's connection. Was it just a business connection? Because if our representative was only a business connection and Crow, as the CEO, is talking to our representative, our professional representative, about her personal feelings of Loki's Wyrdlings and of Ky, that's not personal anymore. You have made it professional. You have made it an organizational issue. And I believe that dismissing that is a gross oversight of the Troth. And as someone who, again, communication is a big thing for me, it's one of my special interests, that words have impact. And where, when, and how you say those words can really change that impact. Saying, I'm sorry, can be genuine, can be hollow, and can be disingenuous. Hi, how are you? Can be so many different ways based on how it's said, when it's said, and where it's said. And so when you're letting out all of these opinions of, organization, this is all of these things, it's going to reflect as, oh my gosh, the CEO is talking about this organization in this way. Can we trust that organization because we see the Troth as trustworthy? Or the other way could happen, is the Troth trustworthy if they're willing to just openly and quickly bad talk an organization? Are they going to talk about this? Like, if I was not Loki's Wyrdlings and I ever heard it, I would be wondering whether or not the Troth is going to talk about my organization that way. I would be wondering if the CEO, should I even interact with the CEO of the Troth? Because I don't want to be talked about that way. What I don't, it's very unprofessional. And for an organization that's been around for nearly 40 years, it's kind of inexcusable. Like, really? Like, that's okay? You think that kind of behavior is just okay? You need to hold your leadership to an accountability. They need to have some integrity. And if you can't have integrity at the top of the hierarchy, you're not going to have integrity anywhere. And I feel, and I hate to compare, us to them because it's not a competition, but that is something that I have noticed just as an observation, is that we have the ability to question people. Like, it's not just you. We've had another member of our board that we've had to question before, where it's like, hey, your behavior needs to be adjusted, or hey, someone's brought up your behavior needs to be adjusted, and we handled it. We keep the accountability there. And it just feels like they don't care, that the board really truly does not care, and does not care about the health of their organization and the health of their community. Because if the head of the snake is poisoned, or the head of the snake is bad, then the whole body is going to be bad. The whole body. You can't dismiss toxicity in the brain and not think it's going to affect the body. It is just, I don't have words, really. It really, and I'm probably going to get very worked up if I continue, but like it really made me feel some type of way. Yeah.
Work because it's true. Like, if you overlook anything, like, then it tends to pervade the organization. That's why I said we got lucky that we caught what we did
really
with
did.
what was going on because of my trauma, and it was impacting the leadership team, that we caught it before it had a chance to go beyond that. Because I am and have always been willing to take feedback, right?
Yes.
Like, I might not like the feedback and I might argue against it, but I'll still take it, right? Like, and I don't
I
insult
almost quit.
people. Like, I mean, I almost quit. Like, right?
Right.
Like, so, like that's not it's not a surprise, right? So that also would have been a thing that would pervade, right? Because if the CEO quits, unless there's
Yeah.
someone who can just easily take that spot, it's gonna be hard. And so I do understand that the Troth is reluctant to like have their CEO step down, but at a certain point, when behavior gets that outrageous, whenever your CEO is going out and saying things that are very insensitive, especially as someone who was previously their communications director, I have some serious questions about why that person is still in leadership, because it's not okay, right? Like if I
Hmm.
were doing that, I would expect someone to be like, listen, you need to stop, or you need to like give this
Yeah.
to someone else. I don't think I ever got that bad.
Thankfully, I've never, I mean, there have been a few times like just basic behavior and like in the Discord, like honestly, earlier today, I was like, hey, I can't have you spamming because you shared a few things in a few places that I was like, hey, just like too many places. But like it's never been a case of Kai, you need to sit down and shut up. It's always been, hey Kai, like, maybe we need to approach something from a different perspective. And it's always been within the leadership. It's never, to my knowledge, I mean, I'm only one person, but from my perspective and what I've heard, seen, and observed, it's never spilled out into the organization. I mean, people have gone to you to be like, is this a credible source or author? And that's just you giving your academic opinion or perspective or knowledge of like, well, here are the facts. Not once have you been like, this person I have the opinion of. Like, it's just, it feels like apples and oranges to me, really, to compare. It
And
feels
and I, and
weird.
I don't and I don't encourage
Yeah.
comparison, because like
Yeah.
that's the thing, is like
I hate
we're not
comparing.
competing we're not competing with anyone, right? Like I've
Right.
never, from day one, I was never like, we're going to be the best and the greatest community of looking. I've never said that. We don't compete with people, because what's the point of competition other than to like make other people feel bad about themselves, right?
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. We're all in it with the same common goal. We want to create a safe sanctuary for people who practice within our faith, or even not. We actually have some people in the organization who aren't Lokian, aren't even heathen or Norse pagan. They just really vibe with the community and they're like, I just like being here, man. It's really cool. And for those who are like, hey, it's not my vibe, that's why there's other communities. Is that you aren't gonna, it's just like people go to different grocery stores. It's like, yeah, they all carry more or less the same product and there are about the same prices, but like whether you prefer Whole Foods or, Sprouts is gonna be personal opinion. And maybe you like the culture and layout and setup of Sprouts better than Whole Foods. And that's fine. There's no competition.
and I don't
That's
chase
why
people.
there's variety.
And we also don't chase people who leave. Like if you don't find Weirdlings your environment, cool, that's not for you.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be offended by that. Not all cultures are for all people, and I get that, right? Like,
exactly.
and the and we've never tried to poach anyone either, because I think that whole idea is just
Right.
ridiculous, because that would just invite an environment of competition into the organization that we currently don't
Hmm.
have.
Right. It's not, yeah, nothing. I don't even, I'm trying. Wow. I've never quite realized till right now just how little competition we have. Like, yeah, there's, I'm trying to find any kind of instance, and it's like, not even Loki Fest. Like, I'm not like, I'm gonna run it better than Kai. It's like, no, I'm gonna take what Kai already did and like build on it. Like, I want to work with it. Not, I'm gonna toss out all the work he did and start over. It's like, no, like there was a lot of work put in that now I don't, honestly, call me lazy, but like I don't want to do all that work. And the fact that somebody else already has, I love, and I'll be like, I can take it from here now. Thank you. But there's no competition of like, I'm going to do it better. There might be a point where I might have to hand it back to you and be like, hey, Kai, it's at a point that I don't know what to do anymore. Or pass it on to somebody else. I am honestly like, the way I'm setting it up is, what about when I can't do it? It's not that somebody else can do it better than me. It's that they can do it in a different way that it means now. And perhaps that comes from us being Lokians and that we have a unique view on the world. But so now that we're getting to the end of our interview, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yes. So I probably should explain that the reason that I decided to come forward about my experience with the Troth is actually inspired by partially by the recent events, with like Paxton being ousted from the Troth, but also because of the statement that the Troth released whenever that happened, where the end of the statement basically says the Troth stands with all abuse victims. I'm challenging that because I haven't seen proof of it and I was abused by the Troth. So if the Troth really isn't just rotting from the inside out, they need to show that through keep showing that they actually mean the words they said in their statement. So that is why I chose to come forward with this.
And honestly, we'd like to thank you for your story and thank you for the bravery it takes to speak up. Speaking up against something that has caused so much trauma is never easy. And it is a very, very brave thing to do, especially when you also hate being recorded and being on camera. And so, all in all, this is a very scary thing. And thank you again for being vulnerable with us and being willing to share things. And I am very, very glad and thankful and honored for being part of Loki's Weirdlings and part of your life and seeing the changes that you've gone through and the looking forward to the healing in the future and what Loki's Weirdlings can do.